Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is David Novak. It is hard to believe that just 2 weeks ago I posted another reading of my own poetry. It was a monumental or gargantuan video of over an hour of me reading my own poems drawn from all kinds of different books and stuff. And I've decided to do the same thing again, another reading of my own poems, as you will have seen from the title. 2 weeks, it seems like much more than 2 weeks. For one thing, I am no longer a citizen of the same country as I was. Our country, my country, the United States of America, has changed dramatically, if not drastically. And then, in addition to that, I embarked on this series of readings where I read poems by W.H. Auden, William Butler Yeats, 4 different videos there, A.E. Housman, Thomas Hardy, 2 videos there. I think I'm going to give that a rest. Gerard Manley Hopkins would be the next logical choice for me, and I just don't feel like Hopkins right now. I thought that I would read, however, exclusively from my book, The Rip of Gales. Here is me on the back, standing next to some ginseng. In that last video, I think it must have been, I showed this probably, and instead of saying ginseng, I said, oh, here I am next to some kimchi. It's amazing how when you speak, the wrong words just pop out. When I finished that Thomas Hardy video, I said, oh, there it is. I'm done with Yeats. So that's how it goes with me, extemporaneous speaking and poetry. So actually, I did something quite unusual today, something I had thought about doing in the past and even tried tentatively doing in the past, and now I have done it all the way. And that is, I closed my Facebook account. So I've been on Facebook maybe 14 years, something like that, a little less than that. I'm not sure. When I closed it, I noticed it said what date I had started, but I didn't let it register. So I should have jotted it down. And actually, this book, well, in the old days, Facebook had a feature, which was, there was a section called Notes, and you could post little notes to yourself. I and a number of other poets that I was acquainted with through Facebook would use that section to post our poems. At some point, that feature was dissolved, went away. Of course, Facebook said they would keep them regardless. You couldn't add to it, but they would keep them. And then at some point, it went away. I enjoyed Facebook at the start, I think. And then I've just been hanging on without much interest. I've gotten tired of it because it feels as though 90% of what I have coming through my feed is just stuff that I'm not interested in seeing. What I want to see is posts by my friends. And Facebook instead, and I'm not even talking about advertisements. I understand the occasional advertisement is necessary, but it happened to be that I would just get this endless succession of things that we think you would like to see videos. So not, quote unquote, a paid advertisement, though something was determining that Facebook felt I should see these things. And I for a while, I would be deleting them and blocking them and doing all this clerical work to try to get control of my feed. And then after a while, I started realizing, well, actually, these things that they want me to see are pretty interesting. And so for about a week or so, I've succumbed and allowed myself to see all these interesting things. but I decided that's it, and I have no particular esteem for Mark Zuckerberg, so I am happy to leave that part of his empire, uh, that part as being a contributor to his wealth, but not his largesse. Sometime before Elon Musk took over Twitter, I had been on that platform and I got out. I think it was probably a week, 2 weeks, a month, something like that before he took over. And I am very happy without Twitter, although that was another platform that I liked very much. I followed numerous people as far as during the COVID period. I mean, we still may well be in a COVID period. I was able to follow a lot of good sources for information, scientists, doctors, and so it was very useful. The COVID period, of course, displayed to many of us unfortunate features about many of our fellow Americans who have determined that rather than suffer any inconvenience to themselves, they would rather risk our lives. And so nowadays, the way Twitter or whatever it's called is, I am sure that these ideological spates would just have increased 1,000-fold or more than that. So I have not, even though I regret that I don't have access to some parts of the old world of Twitter, so it is, I am contented without. And I am sure that I will feel that way with Facebook. I have particularly a couple of artists and a writer that I was friends with, actually, and they would always post interesting things. And it's just, I will miss very much seeing their posts because they are very helpful for interpreting this world. And hopefully I'm going to track some of them down on other platforms, but I am not signing up for Blue Sky, that kind of thing. If you are here watching my video because I mentioned my channel when I gave my farewell post, thank you and welcome to my channel. So that's a lot of exposition that probably isn't necessary, but in those first couple of years, those poems that I was putting on Facebook found their way into this book. And I don't know that it's entirely poems that were posted. Some of them were not. I had gone through a dry spell. I was not really writing, by which I mean I was not writing a book of any sort or plays of any sort. And I wanted to just feel like I was accomplishing something. So I decided to take all of those poems from the Facebook notes and compile them into a book. And there wasn't a sufficient number. You can see regardless, it's a very slim book, kind of like my first book, Embodiment and Release, to which it forms in some ways a counterpart. But so I went through my notebooks that I was writing at the same time as all of those Facebook poems, and possibly even one or two from before that. I don't really remember anymore. I just gathered up what I could to form a book. So it's just a sundry collection. It's not a piece with a unified theme. That is me in South Korea. I believe that was outside of an art museum. And that is how dapper I was looking at that time. So let me see this. I think I must have put a copyright date in here, 2014. So probably in the several years leading up to 2014 is when these poems were written, and I'm not going to read exhaustively. Some of these may well have been included in that video 2 weeks ago. It's okay. Poetry, fortunately, has the advantage that you can reread a poem as many times as you like, and you should get something out of it. You can hear a poem as many times as you like, and you should get something out of it. That's an attribute sort of peculiar to poetry, I believe. So, was it Sandy Hook, the massacre of school children? I am not sure, but the first poem responds to a massacre of school children, and it may well have been that. So it starts with a quote from Dylan Thomas. The poem is titled Reflection. I shall not murder the mankind of her going with a grave truth, nor blaspheme down the stations of the breath with any further elegy of innocence and youth. Dylan Thomas. I sit and watch the news, an old man. I have seen the young and innocent who die receive heart-rending eulogy and praise, yet cannot compensate with all my days for such a precious loss. In verse I write the troubles that keep me awake at night, portending little for the general good, in witness though I have not understood. Lord, let me make no claim it is thy will, that while beauty must perish, I live still. Let me not be presumptuous as some men, that my continued living serves thee, when the innocent, the beautiful, and young get early felled, as randomly death stung, according to the least coherent means, played out in most horrific violent scenes. That I live on's an incongruity, when all the world has little use of me, nor even what I witness, what I write, can pierce the shadow's pall with some brief light. Yet this is all I know to do, and serve my numbered craft, from which I do not swerve, believing that the progress of the heart must be recorded in my craft or art. Insofar that I fail to mourn, I pray to set parameters that others may. I believe I read the next poem after a fit of blindness. My memory is so bad I didn't remember what it was, and of course, immediately after saying, what could that have been, I remembered I did have some eye trouble at the time, and I will leave it go at that. After a fit of blindness. It is through partial vision I proceed, not toward the shining image of your face in all its loveliness, as must recede perpetually before me on the chase. Rather, it is sweet death I amble toward, lonely alone, but you've another path, while I have only death and God, my Lord, to give me consolation from world's wrath. Did you walk here beside, it were a joy, and I might clap my hands and sing it loud. Yet like a child who vainly seeks lost toy, I search the night and only find a shroud. Given that I have recently been reading poems by William Butler Yeats, I should put links to those in the description box. You will hear Yeats referred to in the first line of this poem. This is titled, What I Loved. I loved the pilgrim soul in you, and love was never false. But just to join your retinue, the thought of it appalls. No, I must have you here today or in eternity, for all or naught, but not halfway, exist the same for me. Your beauty shall I praise again? Let other lovers praise you. But when their chatter ceases, then my verse from grave shall raise you. So that's a fairly standard poetic trope. I happened to be in New York City when Hurricane Sandy arrived, and so here is a poem about that. It is titled Sandy. As we await the coastal surge, none may guess what the future holds, or what disasters may emerge as this day's trauma yet unfolds. Here in a Brooklyn flat we wait with news upon the radio, telling of floods as tides rise great and rain pours down in ceaseless flow. Though we may pray, the gods dispose according to prerequisites none may surmise, revealing doles or joys as some chance fortune hits. The hurricane approaches shore with much uncertainty to breach as we submit beneath its roar and hope our cries the gods' ears reach. As it turned out, our flat in Brooklyn was the appropriate place to have been. Afterwards, we walked around and saw all of the upturned trees and damage everywhere. But we had been high and dry, fortunately. This one is titled Poetic Morning. No verse may ever capture well the depth and breadth of present sorrow, yet we attempt in words to tell its measure, heedless of tomorrow. When others come in retrospect, bearing bereavements of their own, they may with written grief connect and realize theirs not alone. The bonds of human sympathy link past with present, place with place, so keening though it has to be, may be suffused by heavenly grace. The people we have in government today do not have human sympathy, do they? This one is titled Grief's Paradox. I knew the end was not so far, but when it came, it felt too near, and vestiges of grieving are yet undiminished with me here. Thus you may join the pantheon of friends and lovers I have lost. Bygones the heart won't let be gone, when death comes always living's cost. Intensity remaining strong, love finds no object in this vacuum. So I am thwarted where I long, though plenteous grievances don't lack room. Capacious is the heart of man, yet why should grief become a grievance? Death balanced life since time began, and in the scale, proportion evens. The end was just around the corner, so all the season's signs foretold, which I fulfill, becoming mourner, though grief stays strong while it grows old. Interesting that that rhyme upon vacuum and lack room, that's the kind of thing that Thomas Hardy would do. I just recognize that. Not often, but occasionally. And I've always had the uncontrollable urge, if one of those sort of not serious rhymes, a rhyme that would be more appropriate for like a joking poem or a satire, even though it's in the midst of a serious thought, if that rhyme makes itself known to me, then I just go with it. And I should add that line. What is it? Something capacious is the heart of man, yet why should grief become a grievance? When I was young, I took a class with Chicago poet Paul Carroll, and I met a person who became a good friend of mine, Marcia, who was older than me, more literate than me, and she shaped my early reading a little bit, got me to read James Joyce's Ulysses, and we had a good literary friendship. She wanted to write poetry, and I think ultimately, while she did occasionally as an exercise, she realized she was not fit for the vocation, so to speak. But actually, there were a number of us from Paul Carroll's classes, and I can't remember now. I took 2 different sections of his class, and I think there were people in both of those classes, or she pulled somebody from somewhere, I don't know, and we started a poetry workshop, and we met at this, it was called the Agape House down the street from the school, and we would each bring in a poem, and we would talk about the poem. So something maybe the equivalent of the Rhymers Club to which William Butler Yeats began. And I think Dowson was in that group as well. And one of the poems which Marcia brought was titled, Can Grievances Become Griefs? I still have in a manila folder, or several manila folders, all of our group's poems from that workshop. At one time we were thinking about publishing or trying to get published an anthology of our poems from the workshop. It is something that in later years, when print-on-demand publishing came around, I could have just done. And perhaps while I was in the process of making these books, I should have done it. But we had somewhat all fallen out of touch. There would have been no way to get the permissions. So I let it slide. If I were to be on the site again, which I will not be doing, then I might consider just making now you can scan these things and everything, so it would be much less arduous a task making a private copy for my use only, because all of those poems from everybody in the group continue to hold a lot of meaning to me. I say that in my mind because they're filed away. Recently on his site, Knowing Poetry, Timothy E.G. Bartell did a very nice segment about Japanese poetry, haiku. And this next poem, it follows a tradition in the English language. This is not unique at all, wherein poets will use the haiku form, meaning a syllable count of 5, 7, 5, and use that as a stanza. And so this poem is 4 brief haiku count stanzas, each one with a Roman numeral. So it is titled Haiku Poseur 1. His petty rancor stirs not my tranquil bark, a ship tied at anchor. 2. As lazy verses scale his vanity's arc, a vain fool rehearses. 3. He apes a Shakespeare, whom innuendos proffer, modesty makes peer. 4. With scorn belittles sundry the tireless scoffer, but pride embrittles. So a number of these poems, the kind of thing I was just venting in my notebook at the time, pertain to my imagined rivalry with other poets. 2 in particular, no need to go into the biography of that. I was younger then. So this next one is actually one of those poems. He did not like the fact that I have no hesitation to invert the sentence structure. I mean, use an inversion. Well, you'll hear it. So the title is The Show Off with an inversion at the end. So you'll hear it at the end. He rode the bike no-handed and gesticulated wildly. He wanted us to notice, that's for sure, to put it mildly. All summer long he passed ahead with unmanned handlebars, and 1 or 2 remarked they wished he'd fall upon his arse. Alas, it never happened. He took turns with great finesse. He must be doing it somewhere today, I'd have to guess. There's always someone like him, how he pedaled, how he waved. A one-trick wonder, childhood's streets with gold are always paved. This is titled A Prayer for Walking Back, and you will recognize in the title an echo to my favorite poem by Sarah Morgan Piatt, Walking Back the Flower. A Prayer for Walking Back. My feeble gifts of prosody have failed me in the documenting this, how one does languish next to me, near to the door, which gateway to death is, lying beside me while I stroke her arm, praying the gods deliver her from harm. Lord, I am weary, but how much more so must she be wearied, who lies near in throes of illness. Let my touch ameliorate suffering which is severe, with knowledge sure that I beside my friend, lover and friend, remain until the end. Happy she is to pass the time with me, while in these rancid days of illness my stroking, if no thing sublime, may lend unto her troubled anguish stillness, if just in spirit. Lord, I pray she eat, wake, laugh, and that her heart may strongly beat. Yet thou perhaps hast need anon of such a lovely angel. I too have need not fulfilled by anyone haphazardly, for she, much more than stave, merges with me into a single person, although in only one the symptoms worsen. Lord, perched between two worlds, I pray that she may walk back to the living sphere, if for another hour or day, and even I may ask thee for a year, which not my present helplessness abates, as my poor pen discourses with the fates. So, if you take this as a prayer, it had effect. And so we got not just a year, but at least a decade and more. But we know that we are very much approaching that fatal juncture. That last line reminds me a little bit of that famous poem by William Butler Yeats, writing over the bed of his baby daughter in her childhood crib. I did not include that poem in one of the readings that I did. It was too long, and when I went over it, I just felt there was too much that I had a hard time getting myself behind. This one is titled The Ground. As criminals are often seen upon the scene their crime occurred in, or lovely songs, each verse between, revolve upon the selfsame burden, so do my thoughts return to you, substratum to love's nomenclature, because the sum of all I knew depends upon your beauty's stature. This other poets lack, who have no likeness unto yours to ponder. So if my words survive the grave, I think it should not be a wonder. Love's lineament of careful thought was captured not by any teacher, but it was to my lyric brought because I memorized each feature. Still center of my turning, you remain unchanged through worlds revolving, in absence keeping my heart true, conundrum past scholastic solving. Still center of my turning. I would imagine that's some kind of reference to John Donne about the compass. My teacher, Paul Carroll, had a student who became more famous even than he. Paul Carroll never quite had the fame that he would have liked. He had hung out with the beat poets, and many of them, his friends and peers, went on to greater things he never did. And a couple of his students went on also. And this student of his, from a class years before mine, because Paul would often bring him up, I won't point him out. He has since died, but in the age of the internet, I don't know if it must have been Facebook. I at some point saw that he had an account, and I followed him a little bit. We never became friends or anything like that, and I did not interact. My teacher's more famous student. Although he is no longer young, he still is lauded now by some, and has devoted followers who, when he reads, do come to hear the lyric lilting sung as he recites his verse. Yet even so, to hear him talk, but how he rails against the rich, especially the rich versifiers who've found a lofty niche, which thought but causes him to balk and vent his angry ires. Does he resent them for their wealth, or rather that their coterie does not include himself, a prole by self-description? We know not how reputation's health may soothe or pique the soul. Yet let me not grow bitter, Lord, that have not known success at all. For I observe that attitude comes first before a fall. So let me stroll toward peace and toward acceptance, time accrued. It is the only avenue a man like me may stroll, because having known less than he, much less of worldly profit, thus it were a foolish thing to do, to hanker for success. And in the long run, you come to the realization that you gain much more by lack of success than success itself could bring. This is called Fleeting Glimpse. And I have to say, with this time period, when I write about somebody, and maybe somebody who died or somebody loved, I lose track of the subjects of the poem in many cases, not invariably. But so for many of these, I don't even know who I'm talking about. The poem becomes a thing unto itself. Fleeting Glimpse. Last night I caught a fleeting glimpse as you escaped my sight. Where once ambition strode, it limps, nor do the lines set right. There also came my good friend Dan to show me how remiss my verses are, and it was an astute analysis. So waking, with faith shaken both in love and craft's redemption, I banged my knee and swore an oath, but though I sought exemption from time's remorseless mockery as I approached the mirror, I knew that squinting would not see the matter any clearer. A fleeting glimpse of you again, it happens every night. But though I try to claim by pen, the lines do not set right. So, my friend Dan is a Chicago poet, one who I looked up to and sometimes felt a persnickety rivalry toward. He was the only other poet that I knew in Chicago whose style was akin to mine, meaning more towards the formalist side of the spectrum, as the Academy would like to describe it. So I must have had a dream in which I saw somebody. Who that was, I cannot say. And then at some point, Dan came around and criticized my poems and was right about it. That's always the worst kind of criticism, isn't it? Well, I don't know if it's really the worst. You come to realize that it's good to have just criticisms pointing out your flaws. I should be wrapping it up, I think. I'll just skip ahead. Right now, Pope Francis is hospitalized with pneumonia in both lungs. And while he is, to my taste, much too conservative, I hope that he recovers and passes through this bout of illness. The Roman Catholic Church has its own extreme right-wing site, and I just can't imagine what is going to happen in this world if he is replaced by one of them. We are moving into perilous times globally, I think. But regardless, I think Pope Francis must be accounted a good man. And if it's his time, so be it. So this is words after a quote by Pope Francis. And I don't know exactly what he said anymore. Into our separate futures we must travel without fail, so saith the Lord. But if indeed 'tis destiny that we divergent fortunes ford, never again to meet, then let us relish present moments sweet. All time is unredeemed, and further forever unredeemable, alas. So let us not the moment murther, pursuing idols false and crass of profit motive, rather the opportunities for loving gather. True, in the life of day-to-day vicissitudes and trouble bother us, threatening to keep us from the way pleasurable and decorous, as with his will accord, that is a high, supreme, most loving Lord. 'Tis not in money gained that one may actualize a life, but rather through service. So heaven's will be done, and our least karmic act imbue with heavenly spirit, love sanctioned, condoned forever from above. Unto the poor we give our alms, and give the sweat of personal labor to effect what may be begged through palms close pressed in prayer. By keeping true in action to our words only, we forge a path that is the Lord's. So I think I will leave off with that, with wishes for the health of Pope Francis. So this was not so bad. Thank you very much for stopping by my channel.